All right, we're going to do brief exercise 22-6 now, and we'll be using the exact same data that we used in 22-5, but this time we will be preparing the operating section of the cash flow statement by the indirect method instead of the direct method. And I think you'll see pretty quickly why most companies prefer to do the indirect method over the direct method, even though FASB encourages the use of the direct method. So in the indirect method, we always start with net income. And from our income statement there, we see that our net income was $2,000. All right. Then we have to make our adjustments to net income. And the first one that you do is you add back in depreciation expense. Okay, depreciation is a non-cash expense. So we add back in depreciation expense. Now, let me make a point here that some people think because depreciation is a non-cash expense that it is not a real expense, and nothing can be further from the truth. Technically, instead of saying it's a non-cash expense, it is an expense where the cash is not necessarily related during this period. We could borrow money, right, which would go into the financing section, and buy a piece of equipment, right, that would be depreciated over time. Or we could pay for it all up front, or we could pay for it on an installment sale so that the cash flow would actually match the use of the asset. So that there's or installment purchase instead of installment sale. So all we're really saying here is not that depreciation is not a real expense. It is a real expense. Think about a building. You use a building. We normally depreciate a building for 40 years. If you use that building in normal wear and tear, that building needs a severe overhaul after 40 years in order to make it operational. There's going to be things that are outdated. Plumbing is going to break down. Electrical work will go out of date. There's just a number of things that happen over time. And so depreciation is a very real expense. It's just that the depreciation, the cash flow of the depreciation is not related in the period where the expense occurs. All right, so we added back in the depreciation expense. The next thing we have to do is we have to do the changes in the working capital accounts. So let's just put a whole column there on that. All right, so the first one is going to be the increase in accounts receivable. The exact same thing that we did in the last one. We had to add back the change in accounts receivable. And if you'll remember, we had an increase in accounts receivable of $2,500. Now, an increase in accounts receivable means we didn't collect the cash. So we have to subtract that out. We also have an increase in inventory. So we bought more. Now, inventory is kind of a two-step process. We do it in two stages. We bought the inventory, then we have the accounts receivable part of it. And so we're going to assume that we paid cash for it. And then when we get to the accounts receivable, which is the next line, we kind of go, well, we did pay for it or we didn't pay for it. And we had a decrease in accounts receivable. So we actually paid more than, right? Or decrease in accounts payable. and that was 1,200. So that means we paid off more this time. We had a increase in accrued expenses. That was $150. We also had a decrease in taxes payable. And that was $950. And that will be a minus. So we add that all up, and we get the same $1,300 that we did before. As you can see, it's pretty much all the same issues that we dealt with in the direct way. It's just a little bit faster to do it by the indirect method. All right, so that concludes brief exercise 22-6.